Welcome back to the BDGE Fantasy Football channel. We're gonna do something a little bit different today. We've done trade videos where we're like suggesting dudes you should trade for, look at the most traded players, but we all play in a league together, the Your Idiot League Mates League. It's everybody in the office. We have a whole dedicated channel just to the league where we document it. So if you're not subscribed over there, go do so. But we want to take a look at some of the trades that have been made recently in that league to hopefully maybe open up your eyes or give you a little bit more attention to trades that are actually happening in real life. Because a lot of times as like content creators, we get these trades sent in that are like, should I trade Terry McLaurin and Khalil Herbert for CeeDee Lamb? And it's like, okay, that's not valuable to anybody. And I feel like a lot of the trades that happen in this league are a little bit more thoughtful and they're more like team context driven. And I think there's a lot of good takeaways that could be had from a lot of the trades that happen. So we're going to go through a bunch of the trades that happen, in the league that we're all in together and just kind of talk through them, the thought process. We were involved in a lot of them, so I think like we have the context behind them. Just for housekeeping purposes, the league setting, it's super flex. So basically 2 quarterback, full PPR. You're starting 3 wide receiver, 2 running backs, 1 tight end, and a regular flex on top of that, 6 bench spots. So I think maybe just a general overall discussion of the league and like how trading has evolved, because we were talking about how in the league there was nothing really going on in the beginning weeks, right? I think the first trade was you and Sexy, or was it me and Nate?
It was
Rashad White for Pickens. Yeah.
It was me and Sexy doing a minor trade. It was just Daniel Jones for Keon Coleman.
That was out of necessity, pretty much. Like
it was after week 1. Jordan Love hurts himself in Germany. I didn't have a third quarterback, so I was like, whatever. Daniel Jones, probably not much, but he can fill in for a couple weeks.
So in the beginning, like there's no bye weeks. Everybody's pretty much healthy. Everybody still likes their team. Like you don't want to overreact to the first like 2-3 weeks or whatever. So not a ton of trades going on. And as the season has ramped up, obviously the trades have become, we probably get a minimum 1 trade a week. I would almost say it's probably closer to 2
Feels like
on
we're
average.
ramping up to 2 or 3 some weeks.
And like you see that in Dynasty, obviously, but in redraft it doesn't happen. But the fact that we're all together kind of like talking through trades all the time has definitely ramped up the volume of the trades that have happened. Sure. And I think at this point in the season too, it's like the way I approach trades for the most part, like if you're not in a fucking total bot league where you could just screw people over in trades, a lot of times you got to make trades that like, 1, you're just gambling on and hopefully they work out for you, or 2, like I have no problem losing a trade like on paper that feels like, okay, I'm losing a few points week over week, but it fits my team way better than where I was prior to that. And like we'll get into the trade with like I made with Joe a couple days ago with Kyron Williams. I felt like that kind of fit it. But I think at this point in the season, you're trying to like condense your roster. If you have an extra great player on the bench, that's a position that you can never start. Like you need to be packaging those players. You need to be looking for what is the best starting lineup I could have when the playoffs hit. I think like that's how you have to start thinking of your power rankings that way.
I think it's kind of a mix of both, of trying to condense your roster into like the best starting 10 or whatever you're playing with, and then also expanding to more depth. Because like during the middle of the season when injuries are happening, like it kind of sucks if like Nico Collins gets hurt and you have no replacement for him, or Rashee Rice and you have no replacement for him. I think like ideally the perfect timing is like as the season goes on in the beginning, you're trading for like more depths, trying to take shots on guys, and then like trade deadline before playoffs, that's when you try to condense.
Yeah, right before playoffs is like a great time to condense. Most trade deadlines are like week 12 though, so we're in week 9, so you have like a 2-3 week period now where I think you're trying to like package. Like I had a plethora of quarterbacks, wide receivers, so I packaged them together for the Kyron so I can get my running back. And I think that's what you got to be looking for. And I think like running back handcuffs are important at this time. Like there's not a lot of dudes that are just going to randomly emerge or break out at most positions. So like having that insurance, once you're past bye weeks, it's like, fuck, if Kyron gets hurt, like then I'm fucked. But if I have Blake, then I feel pretty good at this point.
I fully agree. I'm at this point, like in leagues where I can afford to, obviously if you're not like ravaged by injury, but I'd like to try and get as many of the Trey Bensons, Braylon Allens, Blake Corums, like as those guys on my bench as I can, because you said, you're not going to have a ton of the waiver wire breakouts at this point. Mostly the really good waiver wire pickups are going to be taken up to this point now. So It's becoming what I like to call stash season. And so you just start stashing all of these people on the back end of your bench, hoping that you do get something. So looking at playoff schedules and trying to find those things as well to get a little bit of leverage where you can consolidate and then open up those bench spots, find those guys. That's where I'm definitely trying to do that.
Yep. All right, let's get into this first trade that you and Joe just made yesterday.
Yep.
You gave up DeAndre Swift and Tyler Lockett. You got Jamison Williams and Debo Samuel. Now, to put some context behind it, obviously, J-Mo's going to be suspended for one more game, right?
Yeah, he's not gonna play this week, but he should be back next.
Okay, one more
Assuming
game.
this police investigation.
Yeah, there's obviously some sus shit going on there too. I guess Debo has the bye this week.
Yep.
The other two players, Swift has been playing great. Obviously, Lockett has had his bye already too.
No, he's not past the bye.
Okay.
But Swift
It's
is.
been up and down.
Yeah, he's
Swift has
whatever.
passed the bye.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, what's your thought process here?
Yeah, I mean, really, this was more so trying to level out my starting lineup. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had the unfortunate thing of having to drop Brandon Ayuk with an ACL tear and Stephon Diggs with an ACL tear in back-to-back weeks. So
Yeah, it's tough.
my wide receiver room got very thin very quickly. It's really Puka Nacua, Khalil Shakir, and it was Tyler Lockett after that. Like every week I was going to have to rely on Shakir and Lockett, which I don't mind relying on Shakir, but I knew that I had some excess at the running back position with Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, hopefully Jonathan Brooks here in the next couple weeks in the lineup. So I knew I could shed one of these running backs to try and get myself a wide receiver. Really, it was just trying to fill the need. Was able to kind of upgrade Tyler Lockett to Jamison Williams as well, as which I felt, because in my eyes, and I think in Joe's eyes as well, because of the way this trade went through, Swift was a point upgrade from Debo Samuel for him. Also, I think the fact that I'm eating the bye week this week and he gets to get players put in his lineup gave me a little bit of flexibility for the second piece, and that's how this deal got done. But it does put me in a little bit of a bind this week. I'm luckily to be in a situation where I'm 2 games ahead of the third place team in my division.
Yeah, and you also got like Alec Pierce and Josh Palmer on the waiver wire, so like you're set for life. Jalen Coker.
We're throwing shots out at the wide receiver position this week, but moving forward, it makes my lineup a lot more even because it's going to be Mahomes, Saquon, Mixon, Debo, Puka, Jamison. Like,
I will
it should
say,
be better.
yeah, I will say, I don't think there have been too many trades that have come through where I'm like, oh, there's a clear winner here. This one came through, and I feel like you definitely got the best. Especially, okay, Swift as your RB3. You've been trying to move off him for a minute, and mainly because his schedule gets impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I've the plan has been to move off of him. I haven't actively actually shopped him really at all until this week.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's always been in the plan that he was going to have some good weeks, and then I was going to be able to sell high.
He's got a really tough schedule going
hits.
forward. Yeah,
I feel like the reason and context a lot of times in a specific league is key because you're talking 12 different managers. I think Swift has not been a guy that we've, as the office as a whole, has not been looking to really ever buy high on. And I feel like you actually found a way to get off of him high.
it's kind of funny because we do have like a little bit of groupthink going on. You were talking about you're like I'm the high guy on Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
From the outside, like you look at Joe Mixon like top 5 fantasy running back, but like you're having trouble getting off of him, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, everybody I talk to, they're like, Mixon isn't that big of an upgrade to the guy that I have. And I'm sitting here thinking like, bro, Mixon is him. Like, I love
putting
Joe
like
Mixon
30 pieces a game.
Yeah, and everybody's like, he's not that big of an upgrade. I'm like, bro, I'm literally asking you for Romeo Dobbs as like an extra piece. What the hell you mean? Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we're getting some groupthink, but also it worked out perfect. Like, timing-wise, this trade made sense because Joe, feeling a little bit desperate, I think, being the last place team currently, feeling like he needs to buy some wins today. So hopefully he's not telling jokes later down the road.
So that's another dynamic to the league too. Is we have like a $5,000 first place prize, winner takes all, and then last place punishment is you have to do a stand-up set out here in New York at an open mic night. You write all the jokes, whatever you do is set. So like teams battling on the bottom are like really trying not to be that last place team as well. So Joe is currently 1-7 right now, and he's feeling the heat. He just traded me, Kyron, which left a big hole in the running back spot, which is why he probably went for Swift.
Yeah, huge hole. I mean, I said in the group chat the other morning that I was trying to move one of my running backs, and he reached out to me, and that's actually how this all started, is he texted me and said, I need a running back bad. What are we talking about? And I literally just sent him like, if it's Jonathan Brooks, I'm looking for this return. If it's DeAndre Swift, I'm looking for this return. If it's Saquon, it's this. If it's Mixon, it's this. And I gave him options, and I said, these are the guys, these are the prices. And he said,
Give him a menu.
He said, I'd like maybe to do something for Brooks, but that doesn't help me because he doesn't play right now.
Yeah.
So let's maybe go to the next guy up, DeAndre Swift. What are we looking at? And that's how the deal started.
That trade happened fast from the point it was like thrown out in the group chat to the trade getting done because I was actually interested in Swift too. I kind of wanted to see how waivers fell out first, and honestly, I wasn't going to give you as good of an offer as what you got from Joe, so I don't really feel bad about it. But
would you have done Olave?
I definitely would have considered it. If I had to guess, probably not.
Okay.
But I would have considered it because this week I really need a running back. And I think it's a good point going off of like Joe trying to buy a win is like you can make trades based on player evaluation discrepancies between the league and also discrepancies on how people value time now versus time later.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest reasons I've been able to pull off so many trades is that I think I've just recognized that I value the current week so much more than most people in the league. And I think part of it has to do with, like you said, we're in the office together, so it's easy to talk and negotiate. And so I don't worry that, like, oh, if I make a trade now, like, I'm not going to be able to make one later because it's so hard to communicate with these guys or whatever.
Yeah,
but
fair.
Joe just really needs to buy a win, and I think that's one route that you can go when trying to make a trade is, like, does this person value the current week? Or, you know, do they value playoff schedule way more, things like that?
For sure. And mine was kind of a mix between both. Like, I want to win this week, but I was willing to take a gamble because we kind of talked about it earlier in the week. Now our schedule coming up is only the people in our division after this week. And I get Nate this week, and then Jack and Joe and some of these other teams who have been on the bottom of the...
Is that your division? Guts in your division too.
No, but I'm saying I get Nate this week.
Gotcha.
Then it's Jack, Joe again. And, like, I basically get to go through some easier games.
Yeah.
So I was like, we can gamble this
It's like
week.
a combined like 6-25 schedule.
Yeah,
That's
which
crazy.
I'm not saying, you know, any week anybody can win.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm willing to gamble 1 week of not having those wide receivers to buy healthy players for the following weeks.
Anybody can win except for this
Anybody
week.
can
I
get
can get rid of DeAndre Swift.
Like, I don't know if I would have gave you Olave, but I might have been pressured to just get a running back this week to where I might have.
Olave would have been who I asked for because I view him and Debo similarly. In fact, I think I might view Olave just a tiny bit higher than Debo.
Okay.
All right, let's move to the next trade. We got JL and JMO, both two very, very good teams, both two very, very deep teams. JL got Ladd and Travis Kelce. JMO got Xavier Worthy and Tony Pollard. Now, context, this trade happened prior to this weekend.
Prior to tight end.
Prior to
National
tight end, yeah.
week.
So, obviously, on the flip side, this looks like JL just got like 60 points between these two guys, basically, so it looks great. JL had been... Was Isaiah Likely his one tight end?
It was him and Goddard kind of going back and
Okay,
forth.
because Goddard was hurt, so he needed a tight end. Now, this is a trade where on paper, like looking at it, it's really easy to be like, JL dominated this. But JMO has Brock Bowers and Kelce. So he'd rather have Tony Pollard in his flex than have to roll out one of those tight ends over and over and over again. And Ladd is also, I think, his wide receiver 4 or 5. So he's starting Jaden Reed. He's starting
Jalen Waddle.
He's starting, he's another good
Garrett
receiver.
Wilson.
Garrett Wilson. So it's another one where it's like he just has a lot of good players that stayed healthy and he drafted well to the point where this was one of those where, like, on paper, it looks like JMO lost. But again, I think he maybe took a loss in just like pure value, vacuum value, but this makes his starting lineup a lot stronger, and he's still got depth behind it to the point where it's like you don't really need a backup tight end in this league when you have Brock Bowers. You don't need your wide receiver 4 is like someone that you could find on the waiver. And it's not like Worthy. Obviously, you'd rather have Ladd than Worthy.
Yeah.
But like if you're desperate and you need to throw Worthy into your flex spot, you could do worse than that.
I think also this trade was made Friday, and then Sunday Ladd has his big game, and there might be some optimism for Ladd, like having a continuing that success in the second half. So
Right.
again, that wasn't there on Friday when the trade went
Yeah.
down.
Like, I really like JMO's side when the trade was initially made, and then only 1 week passed, and now it kind of looks more even. Because up until last week, I kind of thought Worthy and McConkey were like very similar fantasy players.
Right, and I mean,
Just value wise, like obviously, like it feels like Ladd has a better floor, and maybe Worthy has a higher ceiling. But like if you were like have to start one rest of the year, I wouldn't feel confident.
Yeah, and
putting one over
JMO's
the
starting
other.
running backs are Jameer Gibbs and
Kamara.
Alvin Kamara. So like Pollard is just his flex spot where like Pollard would be some people's RB1s in this league, or, you know, at least like a very high end RB2.
Be my 1, 2, and 3.
Exactly. So him just like getting that as a flex spot is a really good way to like package the depth that you have. I think with a trade like this, it is a little bit of like getting out of the, I mean, I guess he gets Worthy back, but like getting probably the best piece in the KC offense right now and the Chargers offense, which is throwing a lot more. I'd be a little bit worried about the Tennessee offense and Pollard. Like if Tajay Spears does start to play again, like he starts taking 35% of the snaps, I could see a world where Pollard's not as good as he was the first half of the year. I wonder if
Pollard does have a really nice schedule in the playoffs. Yeah, we did our playoff video the other week, and Pollard was my trade candidate. Like
Okay.
I feel like the schedule is really nice for him. So that's definitely positive for JMO because he does project to be a playoff team currently, right? And
Yeah.
so he is going to be having Pollard in those nice weeks.
What, like, okay, let's say you're about to send offers out that you feel like, okay, I'm doing this to make my lineup better, but I might lose in a vacuum again. Like, do you send that, like McConkey and Kelsey, what other running backs do you think you're able to upgrade to with a package like that?
Yeah, that was actually what I was going to talk about. Is that if you make the trade in your JMO, you still accomplish the idea that you wanted. You're just sitting there this week thinking, how much more could I have asked for or received? I mean,
Could you have got to him, Montgomery?
here's the thing though.
That was the first thing that came to mind. Probably not, unless the team is really desperate at those two positions.
So it also comes down to team context here, right? I don't think that is not the package in which the person that has D-Mon, which is Casey, is looking for, right? So, like,
He has Kittle. He has. Yeah.
you look at, I think you look at the running back position, and if you're trying to get an upgrade there specifically, like, you're not going to be able to go really much higher than Pollard because when you get to the next tier, it's a totally different conversation.
That's super fair. It's a good return because I'm thinking like Josh Jacobs, probably better than Pollard. I don't think much better than Pollard though in a tier. And if he came to me with Ladd and Kelsey, I'm like, nah, I'm not interested in that for Josh Jacobs. So I do think he made a pretty good return on
And
that.
I think that's where, like, okay, you look at that trade that went down. It was a scenario where JL is looking to fill a need, and so is JMO. But they're both in situations where they can afford to make it with each other. They found good partners, I think.
I think this is one more so where you look at it and you say, man, I really wish I would have got a different piece than Worthy. That's the only thing for me where it's like,
I kind of think JMO was probably just happy getting Pollard, and the fact that he can get something
So-
thrown in on top
You
was
think
just
so?
icing.
I
Yeah.
100% agree. It's like
I didn't talk
the
to him about it, but I
the
would
team
assume.
JMO doesn't give a shit about Worthy. I mean,
Fair.
like me, you, and Nick, and actually all four of us have teams that have been kind of wrapped.
like the McConkey and the
If I
Worthies
could
would
get
be
a
starters maybe.
decent Worthy, that would move it for me. I don't think JMO cares about starting Worthy most weeks.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main piece of this is swapping out Kelsey for Pollard, and I don't think any team is like ever going to be that desperate at tight end. Obviously, there's ones you would rather have over others, but it kind of just feels like most teams in most fantasy leagues have a startable option, a usable option at tight end. So I think just like positionally, you're not going to get much better than Tony Pollard going at
Yeah,
running
and
back.
people just aren't clamoring for tight end anymore.
That's what I mean.
I mean, again, because he has Brock Bowers too, so it's not like
Right.
he has to pick up Zach Ertz off the wire and like play him there. He has like a rock solid option already.
Like JL might have been the team with like the worst tight ends, and even him had Likely and Goddard. Like it just wasn't that desperate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, to that point too, right? You're able to pivot off of a tight end to a running back. That's
I think
really
that's
nice
always
starter.
going to kind of be a dub. Like in Superflex, if you can, pivot from if you can pivot into a quarterback, that's usually like a good move. If you can pivot out of a tight end, like that feels like it's usually a good move.
Yep. I want to talk about pivoting out of a quarterback. It's what I fucking did here. I gave up Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp for Blake Corum and Kyron Williams. Now, I did not have an RB2. This was one that, like, I didn't feel good about sending this whatsoever, but I was, like, obviously happy to get Kyron Williams. It's nice to have the depth that I had, but giving Cooper Kupp up is scary. Giving Darnold up is scary. Those are, like, two offenses and players you want pieces of. Obviously, Kyron's been an absolute stud. I had Jacobs, and then behind Jacobs, it was like Zach Moss, Tyler Algier, like a bunch of scrubs that would be getting me 7 points a game. So I needed an RB2. I had depth at quarterback. Like I had two starters. Like I had whoever the Indianapolis QB is, and then Aaron Rodgers, who are not great options, but they'll get me 14 points a game, whatever. That is like replaceable basically. And then at wide receiver, it's AJ Brown, Higgins, George Pickens, and those guys. So I'm like, I can give up the wide receiver to get to Kyron Williams. Where again, on paper, like you put these into like a fucking trade calculator, I'm losing these on paper. But I think it just made a ton of sense for my team, and it made sense for Joe too, who needed wide receiver, who needed a quarterback. Like I think it worked out for both parties here.
Yeah, I thought it was a good trade for both.
You text me about this one actually before it went through.
I texted so I went through and I said, listen, I'm about to package a QB and a wide receiver for an upgrade at running back. Like I did the same to you. Like, I'm going to get a high end running back. Do you have interest in moving Achane instead for the same package kind of thing?
I mean, I was at this point, like, one, I thought this trade was better for you than Achane, but even then, like, I was on the fence about it. So I'm like, you should just take the deal that you have right here. I'm not gonna be able to beat it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying even too. You asked me. You said, would you rather have this side or that side of the trade? You asked me which side
About
I
this
prefer.
one. Well, I went to you first because I was like, I'm about to use this offer for it was something else too. It was something one or more two pieces, and I was offering it to you for like Saquon, something I knew you were going to reject, but like figured I'd throw it around.
I bring that up because at the time I told you I preferred the Kyron Williams side, and I just think it made sense for you. We had some concerns about Cooper Kupp at the time too when this was made. Like, is he coming back? If he comes back,
this trade was I think
before the Thursday night game, right?
Wednesday.
Minnesota.
Yeah,
It was the day before they played.
Cooper Kupp had not returned yet, so he missed the Sunday game. Yeah, and then I was still like on the fence of. I figured he was going to play, but like
on a snap count maybe and things like that.
Yeah, so I was like still worried about him, and then Darnold was just a piece I didn't want to give up, but like this trade doesn't go through if I give him Richardson or if I give him
Rodgers
there, because one, he's a Jets fan, he doesn't want to watch Rodgers. Two, like a thing with so when I was talking to the trades with you, you seem to be more interested in Richardson than the other quarterbacks because one, it's like you're kind of like dynasty focused, so you think about Richardson, you think about like upside on a weekly basis. But with Joe, since he's around us all the time and like everyone in the office is just talking shit about Anthony Richardson, he's got no interest in Anthony Richardson. So it's like funny how the trade dynamics work in that sense. So I was like, I had to give him Darnold, I had to give him Kupp instead of Higgins there. Yeah, so it was like two pieces that I was like, fuck, I don't want to give up, but to get Kyron, I think I had to do it.
I think it made sense for you, and honestly, I think this trade is the reason why Joe then had to make the trade with me down the road. So it kind of created a hole for him that he had to patch in a different way. Whether that helps Joe long term, I don't know. But he is playing that week by week. Like every week for him is a different week. So.
I will say two things also. If he doesn't have Blake Corum, I don't make this trade. And Darnold and Kupp, I believe they're both already past their bye weeks.
They are.
Which is tough for me because
Underrated
both of my
asset.
QBs still have to have their bye weeks. So I have two remaining weeks where I'm going to be having to throw a position player most likely into the Superflex.
That is something that I am looking at in all of my trades that I've been making right now. In fact, I was looking at it in my trade that I made with Joe yesterday. It was, am I buying additional bye weeks? If you're at this point fighting for a playoff spot, trying to push in the second half of the season, and you are buying players that still have a bye week, that is going to hurt you.
Right.
More than it's going to help you, even if you are getting a better player sometimes. Because having that player not in your lineup in a crucial week can lose you a week. And
in our league, there's no one not fighting for something. Like if you're at the top, you're fighting for playoffs. If you're at the bottom, you're fighting not to be last place. Like everybody's fighting for something.
Even the top, you're fighting for a bye week, right?
Yeah, that's it.
And the other thing is, to that point, I think one of the things that's often underlooked is how many bench spots you have. So, like, I've seen some leagues in redraft where it's 5. I've seen some where it's up to like 7 or 8 with an IR spot or 2. So if you have like 2 IR spots and you have 7 bench spots, you can be a little bit more picky. Like, all right, I'll go ahead and take a bye week on here. But if you have 5 bench spots, let's say, and you don't have the room to play around with that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
I think bye weeks and whether or not a player's passed it is way more important than like playoff schedule. Like I don't know about you guys, but I would rather trade for a guy like, let's just say their same fantasy value past the bye week than like, weeks 14, 15 is easy matchup.
I think it probably is. I would agree with you in the majority of the situations. I think, let's say I'm a team that's absolutely loaded and I'm like 6-1, whatever. I might be like, all right, if I can get the right situation for the playoff schedule, I'd probably lean that way. But even if I'm a fake 6-1, let's call it, like if my team isn't that loaded, I'm 100%. Like I need to win every single week now.
I totally agree with that. Like for example, Casey, he can buy any bye week right now. Doesn't matter. He can drop a game. It's not going to matter for him. He's going to make the playoffs.
Right.
Us, if we're buying a bye week and we don't get a play, we're risking losing, and that could knock us completely out of the race entirely.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised he hasn't been more aggressive on the trade block with the depth that he has and the fact that he's 7-1 right now with so much like leverage in terms of probably almost guaranteed to make the playoffs. Like he should have a team that's projected 160 every week.
I think with Casey, he's just starting at the very like bottom of negotiations. You know what I mean? Like I think he's
too long to ramp those up.
He's not like serious about it. Yeah,
I think the point. So this is like where sometimes, like if you think about if you have leverage in a situation, in most situations, different than fantasy a little bit. Like you can just keep holding until it breaks your way. And like here you could, but at what point does it help you and not help the other person? Like if you have all that leverage and you have the excess, I'm not saying you want to overpay, but you might want to just go ahead and give a little bit more to actually lock in the big crown.
It's fine to
jewel for your
lose on
team.
paper if it makes your team better. Like I looked at my team, I said quarterback, wide receiver, XS. What teams need these two positions and have running back? Which is why I immediately went to you. You have the worst quarterback depth in the league, and then you just lost Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. I'm like, this is like a perfect marriage here, and same with Joe's team.
Literally,
for sure.
Excess running backs. Who needs running back? Joe does. He has,
and that's why I went to you too. Yeah,
hey,
it's like what teams? Like me going to a team that has 3 starting quarterbacks and good wide receivers. Like we're never going to get something off the ground.
Yeah,
I just think too, like it kind of gets into a conversation too, where you could say like being at the top of the league sometimes can get managers complacent. Yeah. And I think that might be a little bit of where he's at currently. Also, I think too, like you said, he's maybe not super serious about making a lot of these moves because even earlier. He's looking to package a couple pieces together to upgrade, even if it's a minimal upgrade or upgrading at all. Like, I'm hitting him up talking about, do you want Joe Mixon? He's like, I don't even want to talk about the negotiation. It's like, all right, well, then why are we telling the group chat that you want to upgrade and you don't want to upgrade?
Well,
like,
I mean.
But that goes to, like, what I was saying. I think through some negotiations, I think he's, like, kind of coming to terms with, like, realistic expectations of what can be, like, actually done. I just think
he wants a finesse.
I think he kind of wants to finesse. I also think it's just him, like, slow playing it again, like, starting at, like, what's the most finesse trade I can make, and then, like, slowly work up from there.
Yeah, but that's just, like, doesn't work in this league.
It won't, but like I think he's like starting to get to that point where he's like, okay,
like our league doesn't really just have straight finesses.
I think to the point you just made though, real quick, I was just going to say that that one specifically, right? You talk about different managers. You're as high on Joe Mixon as I think probably anyone's going to be. Yeah. So I think for him, it might be. I
said I am the high man in the league.
Right. So that might be a stall point there, where it's like, all right, that specific avenue I've explored, I'm kind of just it's not going to be the right pivot for me.
Yeah.
So. There's that, and then I also think that's like a little bit of a different case than overall trying to maneuver or leverage a bunch of excess depth that people aren't valuing that high.
If he was serious about it and said, "Hey, not interested in Mixon, would you do something for Saquon? This is what I have in mind." I'd listen.
Sure.
We'd have a conversation there. It's just that isn't happening. And I was going to ask, like, do you feel like a part of the reason why he's not getting trades done, and maybe this is going to help some of the people at home if they're not able to get some trades done. Do you think it's because he's focused too much on how it's going to benefit his roster and not how it's going to benefit the trade?
I actually think it's well, wait, say that again?
I said, is he focused too much on how it's going to benefit his roster and not thinking about his trade partners' needs as well?
I feel like it's almost the opposite. Yes and no. It's like that he's obviously cares about what he's doing with his team, but he's, to me anyway, with the offers that are coming through, it's like he looks at my team and he has a plan for my team. I think everybody that has their own team is managing their team. Mm-hmm. It's more important to listen to like that part of it.
What do they need?
Like Nick said it right there. With the trade that he was going to make with me, it was going to be A. Rich and T. With the trade he made with him, it was Cooper Kupp and Sam Darnold. It's like you need to listen to what they're going to do with their team. Because if you start telling them what they're going to do with their team, you're not speaking the right language.
But I mean, it's also like when he's like, who wants like Cedric Tillman, Jameis Winston, like all these guys? It's like, okay, they're fine players. They're not needle movers, but like you need to find very definitive trade pieces that you're moving and what positions, maybe not the exact players. Like maybe A. Rich is not the player you want or is the player you want, but it's the fact that I knew you needed quarterbacks. Correct. Is like what you're looking for, basically. He doesn't look like he's doing that at all. He's just like, here are my players, who wants them. Well, go find the players that you're trying to move right now, and where does it fit on other people's teams?
To go into that is you're trying to sell throw-in pieces basically as the main event. Yeah. And you need to find who is the actual desirable piece on my roster that I'm willing to pair with these guys. And then you can offer that piece and say, I'll throw you Tillman in as well to get that piece done.
That's I guess what I'm saying. And that point that I made there was a specific example with players. It's more about what am I feeling for your team? How is it going to make your team better? Because those pieces for most people are not going to be players that anyone cares about unless they have specific needs there.
Yeah, and I also want to say something that I've noticed, like a trend here, and the reason I think something like what he's doing is not going to work, like the DeMont for Joe Mixon plus whatever trade. If you look at any big piece that's been moved, it's almost always cross-positionally.
Yes.
Because when you just do running back for running back, there's a very clear, like, this guy is better than this guy, therefore is a return. When you start to go, like, the big pieces in this trade, DeAndre Swift, Deebo Samuel. The big pieces in this trade are wide receiver, tight end for running back. The big piece in my trade is wide receiver for running back type thing. Like, that is when I think the trades get done. So when he's like, I want to upgrade my flex from DeMont, you can't just go like DeMont to Joe Mixon. You probably have to go cross-positionally, DeMont, Jameis Winston, whoever for an Amon-Ra or whatever.
Or you're just going to have to in a vacuum overpay for a guy like Joe Mixon, which I actually don't think is a bad move either. But
I just think most trades get done when they're cross positionally because opinions start to just like you can't have
gray area.
Yeah, groupthink doesn't really overlap that much.
A good example of that is Sexy and I have been talking about a deal. It sounds like he doesn't want to do it. He feels like he's giving too much, which is fine.
We'll hold it against him.
Joe Mixon for James Cook and Tank Dell. To me, Tank Dell was just a flex play on his roster at best. He has CeeDee Lamb, he has Malik Neighbors, he has all these other guys. And so it was like, I'll downgrade a little bit at the running back position.
That doesn't feel unfair. That feels
and I'll
very
get a flex
fair.
guy. But he felt like Tank Dell was too much. And that's where it felt like maybe
anything below Tank Dell becomes like a nothing, though.
That was my conversation with him. Is I was like, at that point, it feels like I'm breaking him down for no reason. Tank Dell,
what's below Tank Dell in a trade piece?
Well, it got down to like
Ray McLeod.
Yeah, it got down to like guys like Lockett or something, and it was like I'd rather have Dell than Lockett, and I don't feel like the difference between them is enough to like break the deal away.
I get if he just thinks like James Cook, I just rather be in the Buffalo offense.
Yeah.
Obviously coming off a huge week, it's a little bit harder to get him now, but like for Tank Dell to be the piece that like stops it, I feel like is a little
our disconnect really was just I'm high on Mixon and he's high on James Cook, and it was like we both know that it's an upgrade. I felt like it was a little bit more for me to downgrade than Tank Dell, and he did. Whatever, it is what it is. But
I think it's a classic case of people worrying about like winning trades and not winning games. And I think it's I think another reason trades don't go through is I think people focus on too much like your team would be benefiting way more than mine, rather than just like my team is just straight up benefiting from this. You know,
right? Well,
like when you made the trade, and maybe we'll get into the A-Rich trade that you made. Like
get that far back,
Gut was so up in arms because it was like
that's why I knew I was cooked.
When
everybody else like this is good and Gut's like it's a rape. I was like,
because I think Gut could admit that like Nate's team was benefiting, but he was so upset that he felt like your team was benefiting more because it was like because he also has Joe Flacco on the bench, and it's like, well, that was never part of the trade. Like that's irrelevant.
Joe, was it in office that he was up?
Yeah, I don't think you were here.
It was like I think as soon as it went through.
Oh, yeah. I was like, I did not see that reaction at all.
Yeah, no.
But again, I do think a lot of these trades that we've made, for the most part, how you can look at both teams and been like both teams had benefited. And most of the time this will happen. One team benefits more than the other, but there's never been a trade that I'm like, oh, this team just got like shafted.
So
agreed, yeah.
So to that point too, it's like for Casey or for anybody, it's specifically with him. I think he's saying, okay, well, these players should be going into your starting lineup, so this trade makes sense for you. When in reality, I'm managing that team.
It's like we don't want to play Cedric Tillman. That doesn't excite me to play.
But you got to go with like, hey, I see your team needs a quarterback and a wide receiver. Like I have a lot. What can we do here? Not like you need Cedric Tillman and Jameis Winston on your fucking roster.
Which of my quarterbacks do you like, and where can we start a conversation?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in general, the point you made about how these trades have gone down. One thing we have not seen, at least that I have not, unless I have one past me, is if you have a diamond, right? Let's say it's a 1 carat diamond, and you have 3.33 carat diamonds. There's a massive difference in what those cost.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the one. Like we haven't seen 3 pieces of shit basically, or relative to a big stud get traded. So if that's the move you're going to make, you're probably going to have to spend a lot more than what you think it would cost.
Yeah, if you're going to split the pieces up, it's almost like you need to trade 1.2 for 1.
Exactly. There's a multiplier, right?
Now you said we didn't have a lot of the same position trades. There's 2 back-to-back of just the same positions.
There is, yeah. We have Laporta for Kincaid. This is a meme trade that you and Joe were probably like, fuck it, do you want to just swap guys kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think specifically Joe was starting Sam Laporta every week, who was fucking terrible, and he might still be. Meanwhile, I was playing Dalton Kincaid, but I also had Hunter Henry, who was performing well with Drake May. So in my mind, it was like at that point, it was like Hunter Henry's my tight end 1. I'd rather just have Laporta as my 2, being like, I think he could break out. I think he still has upside. So it was more like, who would I rather have as a guy I don't have to start? Laporta. Yeah. For Joe, it was like he didn't have another tight end, so he had to play either Laporta or Kincaid, and I think he just felt comfortable having to play Kincaid.
I like that trade a lot more for you. Just like we talked about this before, like I would rather just be a part of the Detroit passing offense, as well as Kincaid just got an extra added weapon into the offense, and now he's competing with more for targets in Amari Cooper. Yeah. Whereas I know the JMO suspension happened right before this trade, but now that looks even better that way.
Right. We made that trade, and maybe 60 minutes max went by, and then he got suspended.
Yeah,
Jameson
but this
got
is also
suspended.
one of those trades like I feel like we had this conversation at any point through like week 5 or 6 where it's like I'll do Kyle Pitts for Kincaid. I'll do Kyle Pitts for Sam Laporta. Not because any of us thought we were like winning the trade, but just because it's like fuck these guys. You know, they're in our lineup giving us zeros every single week. Just like give me your 0, you could take my 0.
Right. It was just like I'm frustrated watching Kincaid throw up 6 points every single week in my lineup. Like
This is one where if we're not in the office together, I don't think this trade probably goes through.
probably not.
And actually,
we got it done in Austin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we were doing that game with Jack where it's like if this player was a free agent, how much fab would you spend?
Yeah.
And I think he said Laporta, and I was like, bag. I give Laporta a bag. And then Joe was like, would you do like Laporta for Kincaid? I was like, Joe, if you send that, I'm accepting it immediately.
And then he just did?
Yeah.
See, that's what I mean. Like, that's a meme trade.
Right.
what's I guess though, like if you just look at it, but the context behind it makes a lot more sense than if you just look at the trade.
Yeah.
Like, why would you just trade that 1-for-1 at that time?
Yeah. Again, it's like I mean, the trade's only been happening for 1 week, but like I benched Laporta for Hunter Henry. Like for me, it's not a dude I'm starting anyways.
I would still like Laporta over Kincaid rest of the season.
Yeah.
Not that deep. This one, interesting
Probably-
trade.
Very
Probably
interesting.
similar.
Yeah,
Herbert versus Bo Nix. On paper, I think it's really easy to be like, oh, of course I take Herbert. You traded for Bo Nix. First game out, puts up a 29 piece for you, destroys me with it.
Second game out.
Second game?
I had him for 2 weeks now.
Okay.
2-0 with Bo. That's what it is right now.
Well,
So,
Bo's been
Matchups
cooking.
have been crazy for him. He's been playing really well fantasy wise. Yeah.
to me, it was really just like, hey, I've had Justin Herbert in my lineup, and he's given me 12 to 15 every week, and it's fine. It's getting the job done, but there's no upside. And at the time, I looked at my quarterback room with Mahomes as well, and I was like, he's not giving me upside either. I need a guy who, yeah, if he has a bad week, it's probably going to be 6, 7, 8 points, but he has to have the ability to boom because Mahomes is not doing that for me. And so I looked around, I tried to make a couple moves, and nothing really happened. A lot of people did not like Herbert, and it gets back to that groupthink where you said everybody in the office was just not talking well about Herbert. Nobody wanted him. I was offering stuff for Bo Nix, and people were like, I think I'd just rather have Bo Nix. And at the time, I think the name value of Justin Herbert still had some value. It's funny because now both of these guys have actually played well for 2 weeks. But Bo Nix, I was just looking for somebody who had a little bit more upside. Bo Nix has the rushing ability. That's kind of been what he's been doing. He had more passing attempts at the time. Justin Herbert's throwing the football a little bit more now, but
I think maybe that's something else too. It's like we have groupthink within the people in the office that we're talking to all the time, but then like JL's not in the office.
yeah.
Nate's not really like in the office with it either. So it's like maybe you need to find the 2 or 3 people that are outside of the groupthink to make that happen.
And Bo wasn't doing anything for him. He wasn't going to
Yeah.
play because he has Baker and Lamar.
Yeah.
And so it was like, you're not doing anything. I felt like the name value of Justin Herbert held a little bit more weight, and I was willing to gamble and risk on Bo Nix. And so far, it's worked out fine. This actually, there was no conversation of a trade. It was one blind offer.
Send.
I sent him a text and said, sent you an offer. Well, let me know what you think.
Bang.
He sent me a text and said, I've accepted your offer.
Nice.
That was it. We had no
Smooth
conversation.
transaction.
Like it was very cut and dry, very easy. But so far, I think it's worked out actually well for both of us. I don't think he'd be unhappy with the Justin Herbert.
He drafted Bo, right?
He drafted Bo.
Yeah, I think sometimes like a trade like this specifically, especially when you're not using a player, right? If you're in a position of jail with excess, you drafted Bo Nix, and all of a sudden you're getting Justin Herbert. Like,
Yeah.
It feels like an upgrade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Since you
Also-
drafted him.
And for me,
I
it was
think
just
there's-
production. Looking at the numbers, like the name value isn't going to work, but Bo actually has scored more points than Justin so far. So let's just take the risk.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to start one quarterback rest of the season, I'm definitely taking Bo. Even when you made that trade, I'm pretty sure I told you that at the time, like 2
said-
weeks ago.
You said it was gross, but you would rather go with Bo.
Yeah. But I also think there's something to be said about a guy like Herbert and even Mahomes, who, although fantasy-wise they've been underwhelming, at least you know that they're going to be there every week outside of them getting hurt. Like, would it be – I just don't think it'd be crazy if, like, you know, Bo got benched. Maybe because he's been playing well recently.
At this
but
point, yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
there's as cool as the upside with Anthony Richardson is, like, dude could also get benched.
There's a safety
No, he can't.
net. There's a safety net that
Not for
comes
Flacco.
with Justin Herbert
Yeah.
and
No,
those
for
guys.
sure.
Yeah, and when you're gonna have to use him 1 week, maybe 2 weeks for the remainder of the year, like Herbert's a good guy to just have sitting there on the bench
Yeah.
for sure.
I think at the time you made this trade too, you just couldn't afford to stay complacent with Herbert's consistency. I still want Bo for sure in that trade. I am interested to see if they continue to have an uptick in passing. We thought with Harbaugh it was just going to be run.
Yeah.
If his passing uptick stays, I'm kind of curious to see if the upside comes back or not.
It's also worth noting too, though, in that deal, like I knew we talked about the bye week thing. I bought a bye week with Bo Nix. I sold my Justin Herbert, who was past his bye week. So
even crazier. This trade here that we're about to look at is sorry to cut you off, Andrew. I'm just looking at this thinking
this will be the last trade because this is 2 weeks back, October 16th between Tony and Casey. Tony, you got Brian Thomas Jr. and Brock Purdy. Casey got David Montgomery and Matthew Stafford.
Looks a lot worse today than it did last week.
We've all been there, don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I would have still loved it if BTJ wasn't, questionable for the next possible month. Yeah. And again, at the time making this trade, like Puka was out, Cooper Kupp was out.
That's what makes it bad. Is like the gap between the Purdy and Stafford advantage has closed really quickly.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think most people would it's not as big of a gap as the quarterbacks, but like most people would take DeMont over BTJ in a flex spot.
Sure.
Yeah.
But for me, the real advantage on my side was Matthew Stafford was my quarterback 2 behind Jordan Love. Brock Purdy felt a lot more safe, and his upside felt better. And I still would take Purdy over Stafford. But if I were to have these guys back and do it, I'm not valuing Purdy that much more than Stafford today.
And I think you got a lot of pushback on Instagram. I think when we posted this, but for me, it felt like it came from people that don't really understand Superflex or play Superflex.
Yeah.
Where at the time of this trade, it was Purdy over Stafford by a mile. But since Puka and Cooper Kupp are back and their offensive line is healthy, we're also coming off of Stafford's best game of the year. Yeah. If he has a down game, maybe we're looking a little bit differently.
Well,
but
when I made this trade, it was week. We were going into week 7.
Yep.
This trade won me week 7 because Purdy threw up 18 points and Stafford threw up 4. Right. And that in itself was enough. And then BTJ way outscored DeMont, who kind of got banged up a little bit. So without I can at least say that trade won me the week that I made it.
I think you talked about that where you're going on a week to week basis and you can trade because of that.
Right.
So at the time, first of all, Stafford right now, the way he's used could not be any more polarly differently than it was before. He was Casey's on a video even saying he's cooked. And I might have to get rid of him.
You could get video footage of any one of us saying every single player is cooked at one point or another this year.
Well, but Casey was so nervous after Stafford had a 4-point game against the Raiders.
And we weren't expecting both those guys coming back Thursday this week.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like the sentiment at the time was just literally everybody said, Monty and BTJ, whatever, pick your flavor, but you got a upgrade at the QB. And it's just over time now, we've just kind of seen where that gap is closed, like you said, Nick, and now it's I think it's anybody's.
Even if the gap has closed, I feel really good about BTJ up until this point where I probably wouldn't make the trade because right now I need a running back, but I don't feel bad about doing the BTJ for DeMont swap. It just sucks because obviously BTJ is now hurt.
You feel like BTJ was very undervalued in this deal.
No, that was the reason I couldn't believe this is because I'm in the office. I get here on Tuesday. I come in Tuesday and leave Wednesday. So Tuesday, you're talking about this deal. I was talking with Casey. You guys both preferred JSN to BTJ.
Damn,
I remember that, and I thought that was fucking crazy.
I'm like saying, hold on, fam. If you
said that, but I didn't really mean it.
But Casey was like,
because he sent it with JSN. I'm like, because I told him I was like, prefer JSN. So when he sent it with JSN, I was like, yeah, I'll think about it. But then as soon as he sent with BTJ, I'm like, okay, I'm actually hitting accept.
All right, because
I was bluffing.
Okay,
not intentional. It was just like
he was telling me. Because the trade got done with BTJ, and he was telling me, because he went to Ohio State, that he prefers JSN over BTJ. So then when the deal ended up going through with BTJ, I'm like, there's just no way that the difference in those two is not.
Yeah, if this trade was JSN, it would look awful right now.
100%.
Yeah. But I'd also have a starting wide receiver instead of BTJ.
No.
I'm just saying, BTJ about to fucking miss a month probably.
JSN, if he plays for the next month, might score as many points or be as relevant for your team as BTJ.
Guess how many? All right, PPR points per game.
Where's BTJ?
Where is David Montgomery? How many points per game right now? Full PPR.
In full PPR, he's probably
at
16.
I don't know.
I was gonna say
Do you have his ranking up? No, damn.
15.
You said 15. You said 16.
I think it's higher than both.
15.9.
15.9.
I would call it 16.
What about BTJ?
I would
Dude,
say
he's sneaky high.
14 and a half probably.
I think it might be even. There's a chance it's higher than DeMont. Because when I was looking at it, I think on the year he's a top 10 receiver.
I was going to say like 15.5.
Maybe not points per game, but like 15.3.
15.2.
15.2.
Really close to Demont. The thing with Demont is
It's consistency.
Demont doesn't have a single game under double-digit PPR points. BTJ has
Booms and busts.
Yeah, BTJ has multiple, like a bunch of 20. I mean, David Montgomery too does, but it just feels like I think a lot of people look at this and like Demon over BTJ, no questions asked. But like BTJ has been so fucking good.
Let me ask you guys, because that actually brings up a good conversation. Like when you have two guys that on a points per game basis, they're pretty much identical at this point, right? But one of them is consistent every single week. The other one is boom and bust. Do you have a preference on which type of player? I feel like a lot of people like to go towards he's a safe guy. I want to plug him in.
I think my mindset might change based on like where they slot into my lineup. Like if I'm trading for a more volatile player, but he's like my wide receiver 1, I might feel less strong about going for him.
You want the safe points in the high priority spots.
I think so. Yeah, right. That makes sense. I think I like more volatility. The lower I go down my lineup, the more like flex worthy you are, wide receiver 3 worthy you are. I think that's probably how I think about it.
Because you want those guys to be the reason why you win a week if they boom.
And if they don't play well, then it's like, okay, I have my 1-2 already kind of bumping for me.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
So I like this to me is a big point where I use Warp, the Warp tool that we have, and that's so points per game, right? And you look at their points per game are versus Warp. Like a guy, for example, like BTJ. Those weeks that he's not scoring well, you don't love that. But the weeks that he's having those booms, more than makes up for it because he's probably winning your week that individually he's helping you win those weeks. So in the case of Montgomery, I'd rather have him, though, because he also has a huge ceiling, too.
Yeah.
But if you're telling me right now that, like, Brian Thomas Jr., let's say, versus a similarly ranked receiver, the boom factor of BTJ is absolutely worth chasing for me. So I'm going to lean a guy that has a little more boom bust if the boom is – how many guys have scored in the range of, like, BTJ even once this year?
Yeah,
like,
that's fair.
That's why a guy like BTJ to me was –
and also Christian Kirk's now gone for the year. Like, yeah BTJ –
So is BTJ.
That's fair.
Done.
You got him
If he's on my – you know what's funny, too, is when we made the trade – the next game, David Montgomery has that like thigh injury for a quarter or something.
That we were in Austin. That looked serious.
It looked bad, and I genuinely felt so bad for Casey because even though he's in my division, he's ahead of me. No, I felt bad. I don't.
That.
And then I don't know what I did to deserve the reverse where David Montgomery's healthy and then BTJ is now fucking banged up. Like
it's
what did I do?
You cannot.
Right.
That's the craziest part about it, though. When you think about this trade when it went down, how we're reviewing it, what we're talking about with context, that's October 16th. We're not even into November, right?
Right.
The thing about the fantasy football season is information changes so damn quickly.
Every single week is changing.
Every fucking week changes.
Like
dude.
That's why also when you make trades with people, the number one response that I hate the most is like, oh, I like the trade, but I just kind of want to wait a week.
Oh, yeah.
You ever get those?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah,
dude.
it's like everything's going to change by that point.
There's
no way.
Yesterday's price is not today's price. Tomorrow's price is not today's price. So make it today.
Don't be one of those people that's like, let's wait a week. Say no. Just say no.
I get it. I get when people feel that way, but it's like, I don't know. I think at a certain point in the season, like right now, especially, even I'd say 2-3 weeks ago, first couple weeks of the season, 2-3 weeks of the season, you kind of want to see what you have. I get that, but get into like week 4 and more, like it's time to go. Like it's time to go.
What's funny though is you said to me the trade that I made with Joe, the Swift one, you said you would have waited a week if it was me.
No, yeah, I would have kept Swift a week and then just see what receiver I can get. Not necessarily like the thing. What I'm saying is you probably wouldn't have got Debo because things would have changed with Swift. Things would have changed with Debo.
Debo's not on bye. He's available. Right. Things like that.
I'm just saying I would have, for your instance, I would have kept Swift. Just trade him for any receiver you can get afterwards.
I just felt that price may not be here an hour from now, so let's just do it today.
Yeah, I like it. All right, well, we'll wrap up there because, again, these trades are from 2 weeks ago at this point. Anything further than that's probably too far back. And then maybe in 2 weeks from now, we'll have another 10 trades to work off of. So let's get to fucking work, boys. Let's hit the phone books.
I got one out there. We'll see.
Yeah, he's got one out there. You've got one out there. You've got one out there. We've all got a bunch of trades fucking on the wire eventually. We'll follow back up. And again, if you want to follow along with the league, you could do so on the Your Idiot League Mates YouTube channel. We will link that down below. We're doing 3 podcasts a week, going over recaps, looking forward, and waiver wire stuff like that. So if you enjoyed, make sure you hit the button that looks like this. Subscribe to this channel if you are new here, and we'll see you when we see you.
Smooches.
I feel like all my trades, looking back on it, like have not panned out well.